Let's talk about containerization and orchestration. Containers. So to understand Kubernetes, we must first know about containers. A container is a lightweight, packaged piece of software that includes everything needed to run it: the code, the runtime, the system tools, libraries, and configurations. Containerized software will always run the same regardless of the environment. In other words, it removes the most common issue in software programming of it worked on my machine, and so why isn't it working on your machine? With containers, it doesn't matter which machine you work on, it will always work. So for example, if you want to run a web server, you can simply build a container image with your web server and use that image to run a container. Then that image will be able to run in any environment, for example, a Linux system or a Windows system or a Mac computer. Docker is one of the most used containerization solution vendor. Hence, when we speak of containers, we usually refer to Docker containers and images as Docker images. Containers versus virtual machines. Containers are a type of virtualization. However, they are different than normal virtual machines. The most common way to describe the difference can be summed up in the images below. You see in the left image, it showcases a container. It has a Docker layer on top of the host OS, on top of the actual infrastructure layer of your physical machine. And on the right, you have a virtual machine, a VM. And notice how in each of the virtual machines, so you have an app A, app B, and app C. They're all virtual machines. Notice how they have a guest OS, so it has its own operating system. Whereas the biggest difference between a container and VM is this: that operation system has been replaced by the Docker, as you can see here. And so containers are a lighter solution than a VM, as it does not include this guest OS, and it can work on any system as long as the Docker containerization layer has been installed on your host OS. The factors why you would prefer containers over virtual machines is containers are much lighter, it can spin up or get removed faster, it requires less disk space, and most of the time less memory as well. You can have multiple containers on one virtual machine or one physical machine, whereas for VMs, it is difficult to place another VM on top of a VM, and this is known as the double virtualization effect, or having several VMs running simultaneously on one physical machine. It's not impossible, but it is not that easy to implement. So how does Kubernetes come into all of this? I'll give you a practical example. When you want to use containers for real applications such as an e-commerce website, you have many different parts such as a front-end facing server, a back-end server, and data storage, etc., etc. You cannot possibly combine all of these functions like the front-end server or back-end server and package that in a single container. What you want to do is package, say, the front-end server in one container and the back-end server in another container, and then the storage solution in another container. So your only option would be to use multiple containers to build your application. Then you'll face the problem of maintaining multiple containers and trying to connect them to each other, as a front end must talk to a back end and back end must connect to a database, so on and so forth. And then when you need to update your software, you may need to update your containers one by one. You might want to do that manually, but that is not recommended. And this is where Kubernetes come in. Kubernetes is a container orchestration tool, which means that it helps orchestrate the deployment of multiple containers and make the whole process smoother and simpler. It helps manage its state and make sure the container is always running smoothly. There are many nice features built into Kubernetes, which we will go into detail in later sections. But let's just say that if you want to launch a containerized solution for your web application, you almost certainly want to use an orchestration tool, such as Kubernetes. You do not want to do this process manually, as it is very time consuming and is very possible for you to make critical errors or mistakes.